Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. Welcome to this Berkeley County Board of Education meeting this Tuesday, October the 10th, 2017. I call this meeting to order. I declare a quorum is present and the media has been notified. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion by Mr. McQuillan, a second by Mr. Barrow. To approve the agenda, is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All in favor, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Please now stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll now entertain a motion to approve the minutes for the regular meeting of September 26, 2017. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
There's a motion by Reverend Spann to approve the minutes from September 26, 2017 regular meeting. There's a second by Mr. McQuillan. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All in favor, please respond by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The minutes are approved. Next, we'll move on to Agenda Item 2A, Citizen Comments. In order to conduct the meeting in an orderly and efficient manner, we ask you honor the following guidelines. Stakeholder comments are welcomed and encouraged. However, the board will not take immediate action on public comments at this meeting. Any person wishing to address the board must register prior to the meeting. Comments must be regarding programs, policies, or procedures. Comments regarding complaints against employees or other than district-level executives or references to students other than the child of the speaker will not be heard in public session. Groups addressing the same topic should select one speaker. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per speaker. The board chair reserves the right to allot additional time or halt public comments that do not adhere to the guidelines. Up first is Ms. Frances Cool from Pinopolis to talk about the denial of employees' right to speak at board meetings as a retired teacher. Welcome, Ms. Cool.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Good evening, Dr. Ingram, members of the board. My name is Frances Cool. I live in Pinopolis, South Carolina. I'm a retired teacher with 33 years of experience, 27 in Berkeley County. I really don't like public speaking, and I'm rather shy and would prefer to hide out in the background. But when I heard about your proposed board proposal for board operations on public speaking denying employees the right to speak to the board, I felt compelled to come and address you. I first came to Berkeley County in 1981 as a young teacher at Berkeley Elementary. The superintendent at the time was Dr. Henry Bonner. I would see him on the street in various places. He would always stop and speak to me and tell me how much he appreciated me and what I was doing for the children of Berkeley County. Over the years, this happened many times. I felt valued and important to the school district. I felt like I was just a little nobody, but the superintendent would stop and speak to me. Then came along Superintendent Gibson and Dr. Jamie Hyman. The same thing would occasionally happen. Dr. Hyman even sent every employee a birthday card. That is such a small thing, but with such a huge impact. When Dr. Floyd was superintendent, I became involved with the teacher forum. He and the board welcomed the teacher forum's input. Throughout the years, I'm sorry, I kind of get a little nervous here. Throughout the years, I remember individual board members who were highly complimentary of teachers. Francis Brewer, Harriet Dangerfield, Jerry Prosser, Jim Bohai, Frank Wright, who's still there, and Wilhelmina Moore. Their rapport with teachers was exemplary. I now question the decision and the proposal to deny the employees the right to speak at the board meetings. When I first heard this, what I called a rumor, I called my friend who's a teacher, and she's a Berkeley County Legacy member, and she thought what I thought, well, what about their First Amendment rights, you know? And she said, Fran, this has got to be a rumor. It can't be true. So I said, well, I'm going to go to the top. So I called Dr. Ingram's office this afternoon, and Penny helped me. She told me where to go through and look for the board notes. I feel that the employees should be afforded the same rights as any other Berkeley County citizen. I wonder what prompted this thought, or lack thereof. We don't want to devalue our employees. This just seems like a really bad idea. I ask you to reconsider this proposal and give thought to the worth, merit, and importance of all our Berkeley County School District employees. Thank you.
Up next, I'd like to invite to the podium Ms. Jane Pulling, also from Pinopolis, to discuss Policy BA. Ms. Pulling.
I don't know that anybody can say anything any better than Fran Cool. She was a wonderful teacher, and she speaks from the heart. Chairman Wofford and members of the board and Dr. Ingram, I come before you tonight as a retired educator and a little bit of a policy wonk, I guess. That was something I was in charge of back in the day when I was actually working, and who could be excited about board policy? But I am, and I read it. And I'd like to ask you to reconsider just one paragraph of the board policy BA, board operations, and that's the last paragraph. As this policy revision is currently worded, it states that during public comment sections or times of board meetings, the speaker may not be, and I'm quoting, an employee of the district or a member of the school board. The policy further states that, quote, employees have ample alternatives of speech through their chain of command and the grievance procedure, unquote. I'd like to suggest that there are instances in which employees may wish to address the board where what they have to say is neither a complaint nor a grievance. And a perfect example of that is the teacher from Sangaree who spoke to the board at the last meeting. She very respectfully asked the board to consider in the future not putting weather makeup days on teacher work days. She noted, for the benefit of new board members who didn't have that history, that this had happened due to various weather incidents over the last 3 years. Her statements weren't a complaint, and they weren't a grievance. They were simply making the board aware of an issue. There is also, as Fran mentioned, the freedom of speech issue. But finally, and most important, don't we want all Berkeley County employees to feel free to talk to the board about anything that's on their minds? I'm not a board member, but if I were, I would want to hear what any staff member had to say on any topic. That's just good and open communication, something I think this board and any board would want to be known for endorsing and supporting. So for all of those reasons, I'd like to ask you to reconsider just that small part of Policy BA. I think with a small rewrite, it would be fine. And the rest of the policy is hunky-dory. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pulling. Next, we'd like to invite to the podium Mr. Arnold Cool. He is also from Pinopolis. Proposed changes in the public meeting and board meeting, public comments at board meetings.
Thank you for hearing me tonight.
Yes, sir.
As you already said, my name is Arnold Cool. I'm a retired Berkeley County teacher, assistant principal, and principal. I'm here tonight to talk about the passage in your proposal, Board of Operations goals and objectives. Specifically, the speaker may not be an employee of the school district. Employees are the ones who bear the responsibility of implementing the policies set by the board. Wouldn't it behoove the board to hear how these policies impact the employees, the students, and the parents, and possibly amend or even delete policies that are of no benefit? Doesn't an employee input allow the board insight into the success of the policies that you pass? Employees pay their taxes like everyone else. If they're not allowed to speak, is this taxation without representation? Don't employees have the right to voice their concerns or opinions in a public forum? What happened to their First Amendment rights? What message is the board sending to the employees of Berkeley County school system? We don't want to hear what you have to say. We don't care what you have to say, or just keep quiet and do your job. What does this restriction on their rights do to the morale of the district employees? I can name many situations when the district grievance procedures is not an appropriate or adequate venue for employees to voice their viewpoints on district policy or procedures. Having thought about this board policy, I can only question, what was your motivation in repressing the voice of those most in the know? Those who most implement the policies and procedures you want to put in place. Have you really thought this through? Thank you.
That concludes our citizen comments. Next up is agenda item 3A, operations and facilities, the quarterly construction update. Mr. Jackson.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Dr. Ingram, board members. At this time, I'd like to invite Mr. Gene Sides, our Director of Construction and Planning, to the podium to present our capital improvement update.
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Ingram, this is your quarterly construction update starting in October. As you can see, this is our major project schedule. We're down to our final 3 projects. The Berkeley Ed Center has just completed the Phase 1 stabilization, and we are now in the Phase 2 design of the use of the building, and then we have Fox Bank and Bowen's Corner currently under construction. Everything's slated for Fox Bank and Bowen's to be completed August of 2018, and the Berkeley Ed Center fall of 2018. As you can see, this is the final result of the stabilization. The windows are in, the brick has been pointed up, and now we're just in the process of keeping it dry as we go through the design phase. Currently, we just had today the design development estimate review, but on October through 30th, the construction documents for this Phase 2 are in progress. November 10th, we'll get the final pricing from the contract, or we'll get the final pricing set to the contractor, and then we will have a GMP pricing review meeting on January 2nd. On the 16th, it's estimated that we're going to propose the GMP to the board, and in late January, we will probably start mobilizing for construction. These are just some of the schematic views of the Phase 2 design. This is Bowen's Corner Elementary. It's currently under construction. We have currently the Area A1, which is the kindergarten and first grade classroom wing, which is down here in the bottom right. It has the CMU second floor under construction. It is not completely under roof. The steel joist are on site, ready for implementation. And then Area B is the administration wing art. Area C is the multipurpose kitchen and dining room area at the back of the site. Right now, we are basically in the same phases as in both schools. We're installing the underground mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. There are some mechanical, electrical, and plumbing overheads going on the first floor. Central stair and structural steel is in progress. Second story masonry is in progress. The large structural support beams are in progress and on site of being installed, as well as parking lot storm drainage. In addition to this progress, since June, the site's had severe rain events that are totaling 36.5 inches. This is a time-lapse video of the progress from June to 17 to September. Just to give you an idea as to what conditions, as you notice, the clouds remain in the picture at all times. And the focus of tonight's quarterly update is the Fox Bank Elementary School. It's currently under construction. We've been doing site prep. To kind of give everybody a quick reorientation to the school, the administration, which is this blue area to your left on the left-hand side of the slide, that will be the area facing Fox Bank Plantation. That is your main, I guess you could say, formal entry. And in the kindergarten area, that is going to be your parent-student drop-off. And at the first grade house area where the kitchen is, that's going to be your bus loop drop-off. Second floor will have your fourth, fifth grades, and your second and third grades. The second and third grade will be above the first grade, and the fourth and fifth above the kindergarten. The media center is located centrally, and it's going to be a two-story element, the same as with the dining and multi-purpose rooms. And this is an aerial. Currently, the construction, we started 3 months behind Bowen's Corner. We started with an early site package, had that completed May 22nd, and started the building construction a week later. And we have a substantial completion currently July 15th, but due to the rain events, we may be pushing that date a little bit forward to around the 1st of August. The current rainfall total since we started this project is around 33 to 34 inches. We're still working on confirming all that. The current activities is we have the underground mechanical, electrical, and plumbing conduit being installed, CMU foundations, slab preparations in all classes or in all classroom wings on the first floor in progress. We've got storm drainage system, and we're working on parking lot grading and stabilization that are also resulting in some additional site mucking and filling just for the drives and parking areas just to get to the building construction sites or portions of the building. These three photographs show just the current progress regardless of the weather impacts. We got an overall main view from Fox Bank Plantation Drive is the larger picture, and then the two smaller pictures are both ends of the Area C, which house the kitchen, cafeteria, and multipurpose room. And then this is a small montage that we created for you. That's it. Are there any questions?
Very exciting progress. Well, can we, those time lapses, can we share those on the website?
Yes, this is for
Is it-
public forum, yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's
so
out
it can
on
be, the filming
Excellent.
and everything.
Thank you very much.
Are we on schedule, Gene?
We are on schedule. We are concerned. We are keeping an eye on the weather. We're just, we've lost our time cushion on Fox Bank. But we are going to open in August 2018. That's our intent.
Is that because of the weather?
Yes. If we have another month like we had in September,
It's gonna be tough.
we'll probably be accelerating the schedule. So it's going to be some cost impacts associated with that.
Madam Chair, I'm still concerned with the second graders being on the second floor. You did say the second graders go to the second floor, right?
Yes, that's the current layout.
It just doesn't seem practical in case of emergency. To me, it doesn't.
Are there other schools in the district where we have second graders on second floor? I don't know who.
That I'm not knowing.
Yes, ma'am. So we do have other schools in the district that are multi-story. And we also have, I believe there are second graders on the upper levels. In the school I'm thinking about in particular, all of the students have to go up and down the flight of stairs.
Really?
Yes, sir.
And that just increased the possibility of danger. That's just my opinion. I'm just concerned, that's all. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Thank you, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Sides. Next, we'll move on to agenda item 4. 4A, local board approval for a course for newspaper. Dr. O'Gorman.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Ingram, ladies and gentlemen. Exciting stuff tonight. Yearbook, newspaper. This first agenda item, newspaper 2, newspaper 3, college prep, newspaper 3 honors, newspaper 4 college prep, newspaper 4 honors. These are all former courses that have been in the state catalog for as long as I can remember. For some reason, the state left them out of the course catalog, and therefore it requires local board approval for us to continue offering those courses. They have been offered in Berkeley County for many years. They are staying as is. We're not changing anything. It's a logistical issue because the course code no longer exists. I just have to get formal approval from you to continue them. So with that, I would recommend that you approve courses newspaper 2, newspaper 3 CP, newspaper 3 honors, newspaper 4 CP, and newspaper 4 honors for elective credit for consideration tonight.
Is there a motion?
Yes, Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve courses newspaper 2, newspaper 3 CP, newspaper 3 honors, newspaper 4 CP, and newspaper 4 honors for elective credit as submitted by administration.
I'll second.
There's a motion by Ms. Kelly, a second by Ms. Lee. Is there any discussion or questions? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All in favor, please respond by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. 1 down, 2 to go.
Thank you. The next is the exact same except for yearbook. Yearbook 2, yearbook 3 CP, yearbook 3 honors, yearbook 4 CP, and yearbook 4 honors. Same situation, same conditions. I submit those for approval as well.
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve courses yearbook 2, yearbook 3 CP, yearbook 3 honors, yearbook 4 CP, and yearbook 4 honors for elective credit as submitted by administration.
Second.
There's a motion by Ms. Lee, a second by Reverend Spann. Is there any discussion or questions? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All in favor, please respond by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. It is passed.
Thank you. The next is textbook adoption for Emergency Medical Services 2. And this is an online textbook with online curriculum materials. In the board agenda item that I've submitted to you, there's actually a link where you can go in and look at the course curriculum online. I've given you a temporary username and password. You can click through. If you click on a tab that says assignments, you can look at all the materials that are there. There are some videos, there are some PowerPoints and things of that nature. And if you have any problems accessing those materials, just let us know and we'll set you straight. But again, this textbook goes through the same process as our other textbooks. Teacher committees review this material and make a recommendation. It went through our CTE program. Ms. Tana Leedy, Ms. Heidi Gary, and Ms. Kathy Crease worked to get this before you tonight, but teachers are the ones making this recommendation to me, and I submit to you for approval for tonight.
Is there a motion?
Madam Chair Lady, I make a motion to approve the first reading to adopt the textbook Health Center 21 for use in Emergency Medical Services 2 as recommended by the Teacher Committee to the Chief Academic Officer.
Second. There's a motion by Mr. Barrow, a second by Wofford. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All in favor, please respond by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. You have all of your courses and books. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
We'll now move on to agenda item 4D, which is the 2016-2017 state assessment results for the SC Ready, the PASS, end of course, AP, and SAT. Dr. O'Gorman.
Thank you very much. Had a couple of hiccups from the state in terms of the release dates for these results. So ACT was scheduled to be released yesterday. They pulled that back, so I'll bring that to you at another time. So as the title says, I'm going to run through these assessment results with you, and just want to say on the front end that there's some interesting things in the data that you're about to see. So there's some new standards, and I'll point those out. There's some new scales. So it might have been the same old tests and the same old standards, but now they've got a new scoring system. We've got some new scores, lexiles and quantiles, that we've never had before. And the last thing is what I want you to pay attention to as we go through these graphs. Our only consistent measure is to compare ourselves to state performance. Our size and our demographics are very almost identical to the state of South Carolina, so our performance is expected to be, right within the same range as the state. So you'll see a little blue line for South Carolina and a little green line for Berkeley County, if you'll just kind of keep your eye on that as I scroll through. So I'm going to start with elementary and middle schools. This is SC Ready, so this is specific to ELA and math. And like I said in the last one, we've got some new state data. I'm reading that bullet at the bottom. So we've got some state norm data and nationally normed data for the first time with our state assessment results. So these are our ELA scores since 2009, and I was very purposeful in going many years back so that you can see a trend. And if you look at this the way it is now, it looks like we fell off the wagon in 2014 along with the state, and obviously there's a reason for that. But I want to point out this green line has remained above the state, and we've actually pulled away in 2017. In short, this basically says that we're outperforming the state more significantly than we did last year in ELA. So just a quick reminder, 2009 to 2013, we administered the Palmetto Achievement state test, and we call it PASS. And then in 2014, we had a hybrid between PASS and the Common Core standards. So we had our old state standards and Common Core in a hybrid assessment. Then for 1 year only, we administered Aspire. So that was the one and only year that we assessed Common Core standards. So in 2016, that was the first year that we administered SC Ready, which were new South Carolina standards that came in after Common Core. And now in 2017, it's the same test that we had last year, but there's a new scale. So the same standards, the same assessment, but they realigned the scale, and so the raw numbers are off by just a little bit. But again, you see that we're outperforming the state there, pretty significantly. And so this is just broken down by grade level. So you can see in grades 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, we're outperforming the state. So very proud of that. All right, so this is This is a little bit different. I've not shown a graph like this before. So this is a bell curve. So like some of you in high school, bell curve is what got me through. So, and what this shows is a norm distribution. So as many F's as you have A's, but most of the kids fall in the middles with C's. So that's kind of how this shakes out. And so what we've done with a raw score for South Carolina, this is the state average. So this is the raw score for ELA at the 50th percentile. That's where most of the kids in the state perform in grades 3 through 8 on that scale score. Berkeley County scored 4 percentile points above the state. So we're pretty excited about that. So that is significant. Now, the other cool thing is that along with the ELA assessment, they embedded Lexile. So Lexile is something we've talked about a little bit in here already. So this is a readability level for students and text. It basically shows a grade level at which a student can read on a vertical scale. And so this is grades 3 through 8. And so for the first time, we've got a national measure. So again, same bell curve, the United States. This is where the average children were reading, grades 3 through 8. And this is where Berkeley County is performing just above the national average. And it's interesting if you go back to the ELA scores that I showed you before, where I say it looked like we fell off a cliff. It's because of the changes in standards and assessments and scores. And what I love about this new data that's in our system, it shows that we're actually performing above the national average, and that there's just something a little funky in South Carolina about how we define on grade level. All right, so this is math. So you see a little bit of a different pattern. You see where we have been above the state, right in line with the state, and we actually fell below the state. And that was the first time we administered Aspire. So again, this was the first time we administered Common Core, and we've been recovering since then. However, you see we are very close to the state, just below them. And so we've actually made up some ground since 2015 in math. So we're excited about that. When we look at this by grade level, you can see that the state outperformed us in 3rd grade and 6th grade and 7th grade, and we were dead even with them in 8th. But in other areas, we certainly outperformed the state. So we've got to go back into our curriculum and look at what's going on in those specific grade levels. But I am proud of the progress that we've made in math the past couple of years. So when we look at math on that percentile, so this goes back to in the state of South Carolina, this is where the state average is, and Berkeley County is at 49.82, so just below the state average. So we're neck and neck with them. Now, this is interesting data, so this kind of blew our mind. So when we look at quantile, so this is the ability of students to do math, on a sort of a generic scale, if you will. We wondered how we would shake out compared to the nation, because we felt like we struggled a little bit in math because our ELA scores are so much higher than the states, but we're neck and neck with them when it comes to math. So this was a little bit surprising. So we are actually doing better in math compared to the U.S. than we are in ELA. And so this was a pleasant surprise. So 3 percentile points above the U.S. So anytime you hear about how poor South Carolina is doing compared to the rest of the country, we now have data, in Berkeley County at least, to say not so.
I would say not in Berkeley.
Not so. So we're very proud of those results. So this is science. We haven't had as many changes in science over the past years. However, as you see this dip, we assessed new standards for the first time in 2017, and a new scale was applied. So there were sort of a couple things going on there. But again, if you see the gap between us and the state here and here, this is actually a gain, although we actually went down in terms of percent passing, if that makes sense. And if we look at each grade level, we start testing in 4th grade. You can see that we outperform the state pretty significantly in all grade levels. Social studies, again, we're pulling away from the state and have been doing so really since 2014. This is probably the most consistent test that we've given in grades 3 through high school, social studies. So again, this shows that we're consistently performing above the state over the last several years. This is a little hiccup. So 5th grade, you see we're below the state, but we're above in all the other grade levels. So this is a curriculum issue that we'll go in and review to see if we can make some changes there. All right, so I'll move on to high school, and I've broken high school into a couple of different categories. There are some high school assessments that are required, and then there's some that students may choose to take. So these are the ones that are required by the state. So I'm going to show you end of course, which I will refer to as EOC, and work keys, which is our career ready assessment. And again, new scales impacted end of course assessments across the board. So again, you'll see some ups and downs there. So this is Algebra 1, and I don't have this broken out here, but Algebra 1 and English 1 also were impacted by the old South Carolina Standards Common Core and the new state standard. So these little blips that you see up and down are because of the same things I showed you on the elementary and middle school scores. But again, we fell neck and neck with the state here, and again, you see this downward trend because of the new scales, but again, we believe that we're pulling away from the state in English 1. In Algebra 1. So this is sort of the opposite of our elementary and middle school scores. We're outperforming in Algebra 1, but neck and neck in English 1 at the high school level. And so we've actually digressed from the state since 2015 here. And we'll continue to look at what's going on there. But again, we outperformed the state. And then biology, this used to be physical science. That's what that means there. And again, you see a moving away from the state. U.S. history and the Constitution. This has been a troublesome assessment across the state ever since it started. But again, you see this upward trend, and again, this growing gap between us and the state. And this is our work keys. So this is our career ready credential. And these are the 2017 results for all juniors. So this is the second year in a row we've administered the test, and this says that 84.7% of our kids have this national career ready credential. They can actually walk onto the job site and have that credential in hand and hand that to an employer. So that number hand in hand with our graduation rate says a lot about college and career ready. I don't have grad numbers that I can share with you officially yet, but I'm happy. Let me just say that so far. And so now I'm going to talk about the high school assessment results that are student choice. So students choose to take these assessments. They don't have to. So these are advanced placement exams. And so one of the things about advanced placement or AP exams are that these are courses that we offer in our high school where kids may get college credit for them if they score a 3 or higher on the AP exam. And we've really pushed for our high school principals to enroll more students in these classes to get them ready for, the next phase in their life. And you see in this light green is the number of students tested, and the dark green is the number of exams, because obviously one child might take more than one exam. And we had a big jump from 2013 to 14. And actually right in here, we got a national recognition for increasing the number of students taking AP courses while maintaining our passage rate. I'm wondering how that's going to look this year, because you see this jump from 1349 to 1968. That's over a 600 number jump in the number of exams taken. And we had a jump from 569 to 965. So 965 potential credits for college for our students. And percentage-wise, it was a 7% gain. So even though we have that many more exams being taken, we have 7% more get a 3 or higher. So we're excited for our students getting those college credits and the work that our schools have done to get kids enrolled in those courses. And this is a SAT average score. And again, these are students that chose to take the SAT. They didn't have to. These are the graduating class. So again, you see that we're outperforming the state and the nation on SAT for those students that chose to take that test. And again, that's not all students, but this ends up in the media a good bit, so I thought I would share that with you as well. So at this point, if you have any questions, I'll do my best to try and answer them for you.
Dr. Gorman, what percentage of students that took the AP for credit actually got a 3 or above?
47.
So 1 out of 2.
Yep. And last year it was 49, and last year it was 42, because it was a 7% gain.
It was an increase.
Yes, of 7%. Yep.
Okay. There's another question. In the Aspire, that was the name of the testing for the Common Core.
Yes, sir.
What was the reason for the decline? Was it because the standards were different or more difficult or higher standards to reach proficiency?
I would say it's if you went and took a driving test and you had been trained on a VW stick shift, and then you end up to go take the test to drive a car, and they put you in a van that was an automatic. You're still driving, but it's just sort of a different feel. So it was a very different test. The standards were different. I'm not going to say that Common Core was more difficult than what we're doing now. In fact, I think in a lot of ways what we're doing in South Carolina is more rigorous than Common Core, which is why I think that those percentile rankings that I showed you put us above the rest of the nation.
And that's a positive trend. That's an excellent report. I want to commend you and the teachers and your staff. Now, the South Carolina Ready, does that still have vestiges of Common Core?
No, sir.
So that's done?
That's done.
Okay.
Common Core is not in South Carolina.
Very good.
By law.
Thank you.
Yeah. And to your recognition, Mr. Brown, I just want to thank my staff. Certainly, they work hard, and the principals and teachers, they are the ones that do this work. I just have the joy of presenting it to you tonight. But they are the ones doing all the grunt work, and we all know that.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you.
I have a question.
Oh, say Ms. Condor, sorry.
Let's go back to career-ready credentials. Can we look at that one again?
Didn't pass it. There we go. Mm-hmm.
That one, it really does interest me. Do we know specifically what careers we might be looking at here?
Yeah, so we, great question. One of the things that Dr. Ingram and I and Ms. Lee and Dr. McLaren we've talked about, you're going to get me excited, so I'm going to try not to go too far into this.
Okay.
So Lexiles and Quantiles, it is the only metric that's specifically tied to a career. So if you want to be a welder when you grow up, I can tell you what the Lexile level is and what the Quantile level is for a welder or a pediatrician or an attorney. And so we can now track where our kids are from the time they take these assessments all the way through high school to their career aspirations. But we also have our students logged into a platform called STEM Premier. It's kind of like LinkedIn for high school. And they are picking career majors, what they want to do. And so we are going to create our own local report card. Dr. Emo, am I spoiling anything here?
No, I'm getting more excited than you are.
So what we want to do is take our students' interest in STEM Premier, really extract data from there to be able to tell you what all the career interests are from our students, how many of them are ready for those careers based on their Lexiles and Quantiles, and then match that up with the talent demand study in the Low Country area for how many jobs are actually open in this area.
Well, that's very promising, and I'm very happy to hear that. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Very exciting.
Just give me 2 years. We'll get it sooner than that.
Thank you for the very exciting report. A lot of good information, especially for some of us who've been up here a while and seen the dips down and the dips back up, and just knowing that we truly have not taught curriculum that standards that match test for the whole entire time I've been on the board. And so to see that continued gain, even as we cross those obstacles, rewrite curriculum, put pressure on teachers to perform, they continue to just exceed expectations. And we've got a lot of people that help them do that. So thank you very much. Like you said, you get to be the bearer of all the good news, but there are a lot of teachers who put in a lot of hours and also support through the teacher forum to get these scores. So thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Next, we're going to move on to Human Resources 5A, the first reading of Policy BA, School Board Operations Goals and Objectives. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I move to approve the first reading of Policy BA as presented from the Board Committee on Policies. However, I move that we strike the last paragraph or bullet point of the policy regarding public comment.
Second.
There's a motion by Mr. McQuillan. A second by Mr. Ramsey. Y'all went off script, so I don't have it. So this motion is to approve the first reading of policy BA, school board policy operation goals and objectives for revision, with a strike to the last bullet point. Okay. Discussion.
Does it allow the public to come in at least once per month still, or is that revised as the first sentence? Is that something that we're going to allow at every meeting, or just perhaps once a month?
So I guess my amendment is just to keep the status quo, keep the policy what it is now currently. So,
okay.
Yeah, I guess just so the record's clear, it's to approve all of the changes that are proposed in policy BA as presented by the Board Committee on Policies. However, to strike any of the new language and maintain our current policy as it relates to public comment.
Okay, so part of the policy change is a little bit change in structure for everybody who didn't read all the board policies. And thank you, Reverend Spann, Ms. Condor, and Mr. Ramsey, who served on the policy committee to get us headed in this direction. We've been working and thinking about policies for a while. But one of the things that we want to accomplish is to make us a more effective and engaged and informed board. And so we are considering a committee structure, so that one meeting a month will be committee structure, where we'll be rolling our sleeves up, meeting in committee. We do plan to have an executive session for that, to hear attendance appeals or expulsion appeals or anything that's pressing, but to really give us time to dig into information, spend more time listening and understanding. And then the other meeting of the month would be more traditional meeting like this. So that's why we're saying we will have comments one time a month, to ensure that that committee structure doesn't keep people from being able to comment, was the intention. So do you leave that sentence and just strike the restriction? Will you accept a friendly amendment to keep the first sentence of that bullet?
It's whatever. I guess my amendment is just to keep the policy as it is. If people want to come speak at committee meetings, they can come speak at that meeting, or whenever they want to within the month. If they want to come speak at both meetings twice in 1 month, that's fine by me.
What does our current policy say for that?
There's no limitation. The only limitation in this process would be our meeting structure.
Do we need to have that in a policy, though?
How often you're going to set it on the agenda? No. Do we? I know Dr. Levine is here. Mr. Whitley is here too, to make sure we don't, do anything that is inappropriate and not lawful. Is it required that we spell out how often we allow public comment? So can we strike that whole bullet point and still do what we need to do?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The answer is yes. You cannot have public comment at all. That's why it's called a limited designated forum. The Constitution only applies if you choose to open up a forum, then you've got to abide by viewpoint neutrality and so forth. So you can have no public comment. The difficulty with Mr. McQuillan's strike-through is you are actually repealing, in this new policy that the committee worked very hard on, it's consolidating everything under one policy. So by striking the paragraph, I fear you're actually striking public comment altogether. You're going to have to go and move to adopt a new policy, policy BB, and you can say it's the same as the old policy on comment. But this structure of BA eliminates all other old policies, collapse it in one BA, board operations. And so that's my fear with that amendment. I think if the concern is those expressed earlier by the speakers, which I was very heartened by. I mean, it's a policy on the First Amendment, and you have First Amendment speakers come to speak on the validity, and Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes said the marketplace of ideas is where truth will be born. If that's the concern, I think you address that sentence. But I think you still, if the members of the board want to have a public forum, limited public forum, you need to have that bullet point, and it can be substantively the same as you had before, but you're going to have to adopt it into this policy as it's being presented from this committee. Does that make sense, Madam Chairwoman?
Yes, and I desire to have public comment. Dr. Levine actually had done tremendous work in a grievance policy, and so when I was thinking about public comments, I was thinking I don't want our teachers or employees to be limited to 3 minutes in the public. I want them to have all the time and discussion and process to be fully heard in the grievance process. I didn't really consider it in the other light. So that was my consideration when I was reading it, was there's a really strong grievance vehicle to really hear our teachers out, really hear our students out. I don't want someone to feel like the only chance they get to talk to the board is 3 minutes here in public comment. I want them to be heard much more than 3 minutes. So it was not to limit them from speaking, but to give them other avenues to speak. But I'm agreeable with the board to strike that or to strike that sentence. But we cannot limit by viewpoint. We do want it to be based on everything that the back of this card says. Comments regarding programs, policies, and procedures. I think some of this, it will be 3 minutes that you have to register prior to the board. I think all of those are real valid things that you have to include so you can have an appropriate limited comments.
What I would suggest for the good of the board, and I do thank Reverend Spain and Ms. Condor and Mr. Ramsey, this is first reading. So it has to be adopted twice before it has the effect of a policy from y'all. So if y'all adopt it in whatever form, it doesn't take place even at the next meeting. You'll have a second reading. The reason you have multiple readings is so that you can fine-tune it, hear others' concerns, make the correction, or not, however you want to vote. But that's a policy question. I will tell you, if you strike it, my estimation will be, and you repeal everything else, you won't have a public comment section. You can come back, and I envision 6 months from now, y'all are going to need policy BB, something we didn't think about, and you want to include it, and you throw in another policy. There'll be things you need to develop as y'all go. But you would not have it if you adopted first and second reading with that struck through. So I think Mr. Ramsey had talked to me about an amendment.
Yes.
An amendment that would address the employee concern. I don't know if that's your concern too, Mr. McQuillan, but if that were adopted and it could move on to second reading, you could incorporate it all.
And during the second reading, we could still adjust it, is what you're saying.
You can amend it at second reading as well.
I would say you could go line by line and amendment. We can vote on amendments all night long. We can go line by line if you like. So I can entertain an amendment to Mr. McQuillan's initial motion. So Mr. McQuillan's motion is to strike the entire bullet point
And replace it with our current policy.
and replace it with our current policy.
It would fail for a second.
Huh?
There wouldn't be an amendment. Okay.
Second.
I was going to say, that was in the initial motion, was to take that bullet point out and include our current policy in that bullet point. Do we need something different than that?
I just have a question on another point, another area of this particular policy. I'm good with that, okay? But has nothing to do with who our attorney is, but it does not specify how our attorneys are contracted in terms of their contractual agreement. As the prior policy requires the board to negotiate the attorney fees, and that's not listed here. So I have a concern about that. I don't know if we need to make an amendment to say we need to stipulate that the attorney fees will be in consultation with the board and approval with the chair.
Madam Chair, I have an amendment concerning that, knowing whether it's what Mr. Barrow is referring to. I would like to make mention of it. I would like to offer the following amendment to policy BA regarding hiring of attorney to read as follows. The district general counsel may hire specialized counsel from time to time with the approval of the board.
Second. So there is and we'll have to come back.
That's fine.
Because I don't think that covers
Is that what you're
everything that you
referring
need.
to?
It does not cover that, no.
So there is an amendment that the district general counsel may hire specialized counsel from time to time with the approval of the board, given by Reverend Spann and seconded by Wofford. So now we need to entertain debate on this amendment. Any discussion?
We've done that prior. We've already instituted that practice. It's just a matter of putting it in policy,
In
correct?
policy.
I'm okay with that.
All right, so we'll call the question on the amendment. All in favor of editing to read, "The district general counsel may hire specialized counsel from time to time with the approval of the board," please respond by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. All right, so that amendment is passed. So is there an additional amendment for your concern?
I'd like to
Mr.
make
Rivera?
an amendment that the board negotiates with general counsel a contract to be approved by the board and the council proper and enacted by the board chair with council.
All right, so negotiate a contract with the board and council to be enacted by the chair. And are we striking or making an addition to?
It was
Of
not.
all the days I don't have I
It
never
was not.
got home.
It was not addressed.
It was not, is it an addition? Yeah. So an addition to the bullet
Yes.
point that starts at employee attorneys to counsel it on legal matters will serve at the pleasure of the board, shall be available to all members. We've edited the time to time. All right, so the board shall negotiate a contract with counsel to be enacted by the chair. Mr. Whitley, does that do what we're trying to get it to do?
That is a policy decision that I would defer. I don't think you need lawyering. I can tell you, I would love nothing more than to have a contract.
Well, I was going to say, I feel like.
But I think the way it reads actually protects the board in that I serve at your pleasure. So tonight, absent a contract, adios, Mr. Whitley and law firm. We appreciate your service. You're gone. So I really appreciate my friend Mr. Barrow's amendment, and I'm going to ask for
It's not personal.
I jumped the gun,
As
too,
Michael
because
Corleone said, it's business.
Mr. Barrow made a motion, but there's not a second to discuss it. So is there a second to discuss? Oh, we jumped the gun.
I'll second that.
All right. So I'm concerned about this amendment taking away the pleasure of the board. I love Mr. Whitley, but I don't necessarily want to be in contract with the lawyer. I like the freedom to be at the pleasure of the board. And a contract, I feel like, ties our hands and takes away. There's only a couple things the board has the pleasure of as far as counsel or different things like that. So mandating that I have to have a contract with him, I don't, or anybody else, Mr. Gaskins or anybody. Mac, I feel like.
Yeah, I just going to say, when you, at least for me, generally speaking, when you hire a lawyer, you want somebody that you can trust. And I've been in a position on this board before where we've had prior legal counsel that I did not trust. And that part of that was as a result of, I think, us being bound in a contract with them. So I'm against Mr. Barrow's amendment and think that the pleasure of the board is good language. It's basically like an at-will employee. We can let them go whenever we want.
Okay, so who determines the fees? That's all I'm talking about. And into any contract, you can have any type of separation clauses. And I'm not willing to strike at the pleasure of the board. The pleasure of the board doesn't mean you don't have to have a contract. You could have both.
Madam Chairman, I'll respond to my fees. Mr. Barrow, in this case, it was by board motion that I was my firm and the other firm were hired. An engagement letter exists. It's public record that sets forth my heavily discounted fee. And I really appreciate serving at the pleasure of the board. But so the engagement letter dictates it. I serve, luckily, as counsel to Fortune 500 companies. It's based on an engagement letter. I'm not sure ethically I can contract legal services to the extent what you want. The engagement letter is a contract in certain ways. This is my fee, and y'all sign it based on the board approval, agree to pay it. This policy lets you get rid of me at the next board meeting where you notice it. So I'm happy to share with you that engagement letter, Mr. Barrow. It's standard across the industry. I don't have a contract with any one of my clients, but if you give me one, I'm going to go to the rest of my clients and insist on one, because I'd love to have a 3-year contract. Just kidding. But pleasure of the board, I think, is ethically appropriate for an attorney. I can tell you from past practices and some issues we have going on, having your professional advisors under a 3 or 5 year contract, which has been the past practice of this board, has been a very bad past practice. You do not need your auditors to be bound to them for 5 years and vice versa. So by way of example, so when it comes to professional services, which are exempt under the South Carolina Procurement Code, I would advise you to keep them at a pleasure of the board status, where you can hire and fire at will. But that's advice. It's a policy decision. I understand your point.
Let it be known that I don't mean to disparage you or any of our contracts with any of our agreements. All I'm looking for is a future, because, in 10 years, we're not going to be here probably. And we need to have something, in my opinion, in writing going forward that would stipulate these attorney-client privileges and contracts.
I think the engagement letter does exactly that. And what I'll do is I'll make a note and send it to you tonight before second reading. Call me. If the engagement letter doesn't address your concerns, we can figure that out. But I think the engagement letter, which Mr. McQuillan will tell you, that's standard practice. Our insurance companies who insure lawyers require you to do it via engagement letters. So
it was before you got on the board, but his fees and all that were negotiated, and we did get a reduced fee, and that was set forth in an engagement letter that the board ultimately voted on and approved, like your word you're using as a contract. But that's basically, I think your concerns are taken care of. I just don't know that you've been through that process.
Correct.
So I'll be happy to email it to you.
Thank you.
And we can discuss between now and second reading if it doesn't adequately address your concern.
So the amendment offered by Mr. Barrow, seconded by Ms. Lee, is the board shall negotiate a contract with legal counsel to be enacted by the chair. Is there any more discussion on this amendment? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All in favor of the amendment, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
1, 2. Mr. Wright, Mr. Barrow. All opposed, nay.
Nay.
All right, so we are back now so that amendment did not pass. We are back to the original motion. Y'all are testing all of my parliamentary procedure knowledge tonight. So we are back to Mr. McQuillan's motion that was seconded by Mr. Ramsey to approve. Good Lord, I forgot what policy we're on. BA. That's why I need these pieces of paper. BA, School Board Operation Goals and Objectives for Revision. We're striking the bullet point on public comment and replacing with our current policy. Is there any additional discussion?
I have a couple of things.
Yep, yes, ma'am. Go.
So our current policy for public participation in board meetings, we have BCBI and BCBI-R.
Correct.
And I believe that those are on the chopping block, is that correct?
No, well, not with my amendment. Both of those policies would be substituted in for the last bullet point, and once they're substituted in, we can look at it again at second reading and see if it makes sense.
Okay, all right. So that was my first question.
Okay.
My second question, if we go back to the very first paragraph, the part that concerns me is it states in here, as the governing body of the Berkeley County School District, the board is responsible for all matters within the district. all matters within the district is a lot. I don't know that we have the authority to be responsible for all matters within the district. And that makes me nervous because there are matters that happen in the district that I have no knowledge of and sure as heck don't want to be responsible for. So I guess my amendment would be to strike that part of the sentence. The board is responsible for all matters within the district.
What's your opinions, Mr. Whitley?
Matt, with
Well,
all due-
there's a motion for an amendment to strike the sentence, or strike the phrase, all matters within the district, given by Ms. Lee. Is there a second?
I'll second it for discussion purposes.
All right, there's a second from Mr. McQuillan. And I think somebody was asking.
Like it or not, you are responsible for all matters within the district. You may delegate those matters through a superintendent to others, but you are responsible. You are the governing body. That's state law. That's the oath you swear to. So to say that doesn't charge you under any liability that you're charged with knowing everything. But you are responsible for everything. And so there are bad things that happen that none of us know about, but at the end of the day, the board's responsible. It's the top of the hierarchy. You can't avoid that. That's state law. So you can strike it. It doesn't change it. You're responsible under state law as the governing body of Berkeley County, if you like it or not, or you don't choose to serve. And you've been elected twice, so I know you choose to serve. So I'm sorry, you can't get away from that even if you strike it. That is state law implemented through the policy. You are the governing body, and that's the end of that. So I hate to tell you that, Ms. Lee. That doesn't mean you will be in trouble if things happen that you didn't know about. That's not what it means. And most things you will delegate through the superintendent, but you are responsible.
Is there any other discussion on the amendment to strike the phrase, all the matters within the district? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All in favor, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
McQuillan, Lee, Span, 3. All opposed, nay.
Nay.
The amendment is defeated. We're back to the original amendment. These are going to be some exciting minutes to read. It's your school board working hard for you. I actually love it. I appreciate all the good comments and concerns.
Can I ask a question about the seating of the board members?
Yes, sir.
Because that's listed here. I love several aspects of this. I like standing committees. I like the fact that 3 board members can petition the chair to have an agenda item added. I like the fact that 5 members can petition the chair, whomever that is, to call a special meeting. All of those are great. I don't understand the need to change the dais, the seating of the board members with respect to the committee chairs. Is there a rationale for that?
I think I always think about number 1 and number 9 always being on the end of the dais. My struggle sitting here is sometimes I'm not keeping up, or I'm trying to keep up with one thing and there's something else going on. I really wish the vice chair was sitting there so I could say, didn't I tell you this, or can't you write on this? Because sometimes I do that to Dr. Ingram. So I kind of miss whoever the vice chair is sitting there. Also, when you get in a committee structure, when that committee is functioning, that committee chair will actually be running that part of the meeting. So, for example, Mr. Ramsey as the policy committee chair, he would actually take over that portion of the meeting and operate as the chair of that committee. And so it's just to kind of keep that committee chairperson in the middle were some of our thoughts.
I also like the fact that seniority is playing a role too, because we have 2 members that have, 3 members, actually 2 members that have been on this board for several years. And I think they duly are owed the respect and the honor to be able to sit closer to the chair. And that's Miss Lee and Mr. Wright. That's how I feel about it. So
Thank you for that, but I don't have a preference.
Frank's good.
Come sit by me. Come sit over here by me, Frank.
Oh, God, we'll never get out of here.
I'm used to my old chair. I'm fine, but I mean, I really don't have a preference.
We sit in our same little chairs behind closed doors, too, and if you sit in our chairs, we don't like that either.
Yeah, it's fine.
You're just going to be playing musical chairs every year because the committee chairs will change, the board chair will change, the vice chair will change. So in this way, at least you have a numerical number, and usually one person changes every year. But it's going to be 4 or 5. I don't care. I'll stand outside and vote. So I don't care where I sit. I was just curious as to why it was formed that way.
Well, it's for the vice chair and then the committee chairs to rotate, is because that committee chair will, on the days that you have a committee meeting, that committee chair will run that portion of the meeting. So the chair will participate on a meeting, on a committee, but won't be the chair necessarily of that.
I'm not going to make an amendment proposition to change it, so we'll leave it alone.
Well, I think that Charleston County does the chair and vice chair sitting side by side. And I know that when I served as vice chair, to step into the role of chair is very challenging because you don't know what's going on most of the time. I mean, the chair kind of runs everything, and if you're sitting over here, you can't see what the
there's
chair is
sometimes
doing.
I wish, I could say, how about
that part I do like. I agree with Mr. Barrow. I don't like the whole musical chair thing because I'm a creature of habit, but I do like the vice chair.
You could ask me.
I could ask you. Well, sometimes it's something that we talked about preparing the agenda, and so I'm thinking, did we catch that or do that? And I've never sat in the same. I've moved because every time the chair moved, I moved one way or the other over here. So, all right.
I didn't mean to delay the
This is first reading. I think we're there. So on second, if we pass what we have now on second reading, that bullet item will read differently, and we can have based on BCBI and BCBIR. For that bullet point, it will read differently, and we can debate it. But McQuillan better brush up because I have to be out of town on second reading for work that I have tried, and I cannot reschedule. So you'll have to do all the parliamentary procedure on that one. So I think we have gotten to a somewhat happy place. Thank you so much for all that have served on this committee very much. So we are ready to call the question if no one else has comments. So the first reading of policy BA, School Board Operations Goals and Objectives for Revision, to be approved with the bullet point on public comment to be replaced by BCBI and BCBIR. All in favor, please respond by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. First reading is passed. Thank you for all the hard work. Thank you.
Are you going to?
Oh, no, that's not all. There's a second motion because we have to repeal all the things that this takes away. So, is there a motion, Mr. McQuillan?
I move to repeal the board policies set forth in this motion, except for the policies related to public comment that we've added to the last bullet point in policy BA.
Okay.
Second.
There's a motion by Mr. McQuillan, a second by Reverend Spann. Will you restate the motion, Mr. McQuillan?
Yeah, before I do that, can you read me the policies on public comment that we're not striking and putting into the motion?
BCBI and BCBIR.
Okay, they're not even in here. All right, so this, I move to repeal board policies BB, BBA/BBAA, BBAB, BBB, BBBA, BBBB, BBBC, BBCA, BBE, BBF, BC, BCBH, BH, BF, and BJ.
You're my BFF. Thank you so much. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All in favor, please respond. I'm sorry.
BH, that is our code of ethics for board members. I would like to make an amendment to not strike BH.
Okay, so there's a motion by McQuillan, a second by Span to repeal. There is an amendment. Need a new piece of paper. There's an amendment by Ms. Lee.
All Matt would have to do is read his amendment over
Remember this
and not take that one out.
To
These aren't your policies.
strike BH from the repeal list. Is there a second?
Second.
So my thought process on that is, we kind of touched on the code of ethics for board members, and I know that a lot of it is state law that's quoted in there, and maybe we can clean that up a little bit, but I think that to strike an ethics policy is, I just don't think that it looks good.
I think our intention was to add everything into the new policy so that it would be one policy that would have everything, including our ethics and everything in it. Mr. Ramsey or Mr. Whitley, y'all have some background from the policy committee.
Yeah, there were various policies proposed of old and proposed by the South Carolina School Board Association, which told you to follow the law. Well, I'm not going to have a policy that tells you do not commit murder, do not commit embezzlement, we don't need policies to tell you to follow the law. The law is required. You need to do it. There are some in that code of ethics which are highly offensive to me, not as your lawyer, but as a fellow elected official. I don't care what Ms. Lee does. I'm going to do what I think's right. And I expect the same from you, Ms. Lee. So there were policies in the code of ethics and otherwise saying, you know what, if I lose a vote, I've got to go along with the majority and advocate that position. Well, your 20,000 people elected you to do what you think's right, whether or not you're the only lone voter in the world. And so, as your lawyer, it's my position that you need to follow the South Carolina Ethics Act, A through Z and nothing more. And you need to follow state law. And you need to do what the law tells you need to do as a board member. You need to be ethically sound when it comes to the South Carolina Ethics Act. But by God, if you disagree with your fellow board members, if they vote to do something that you think is criminal, there's no code of ethics that can tell you have to support that vote. That's just wrong in my estimation. So it was removed altogether. It was a feel-good policy in my humble estimation, working with the committee. What I'm telling you as your lawyer, it violated your First Amendment rights. You have the right to disagree with the other 8 members of your school board. And so you can't create a policy that trumps state law or trumps the Constitution. So in my humble estimation, it was insulting as a proposal in the new policies and old. You need to follow the South Carolina Ethics Act. That's a requirement. You need to follow state law. And then you need to do what you think's right day in and day out, and that's your code of ethics. So that's why it was struck. It's a very intentional strike. And my advice, if you came to me as a board member and said, I think what the majority's doing is unethical, but my code of ethics says I have to support it, I'd tell you, Ms. Lee, the policy cannot trump your First Amendment right. Oppose the majority. You do what you think's right. So that was the intentional strike of that policy.
Madam Chair, may I also add we was trying to condense the policy without decrease the strength of the policy itself. So that's the reason why it's smaller than what we've been having.
To simplify, like Mr. Whitley is saying, pretty much, and get it to where everyone can understand, and basically the law is the law. Mm-hmm. But also another major intention of these policies was to actually to give more of a voice to all of the board members, not just necessarily so much the chair or the vice chair, but even with the committee structure, is everyone would be more involved and more in the loop as we were going about making different decisions. But like Mr. Whitley was so eloquently stating, some of those policies that they had taking away our rights as board members was just not acceptable.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with Mr. Ramsey. that when we do that, okay, we might as well just be a dictatorship, period. Because we're made up of individuals. The board is made up of individuals. And if Frank is doing something inappropriate, okay, or the majority of the board is doing something inappropriate, I'm going to speak out.
I think that's a bit different, Madam Chair, though. I think, for instance, it's almost like we sit in the back in executive session and we have a discussion about whatever. You know, I may differ sometime. It could be in an interview process with the superintendent. It could be many things. And as a board, collectively, when the board come out and we've made a decision, the majority rules, I think you show good support for, you know, a great working relationship going forward where you support the initial majority and decision that we've made. You can differ. I think you differ when you vote. You differ when you make your comment or your concern. But going forward, I don't think that you need to linger that on and continue, perhaps to go to the news, but to establish the fact that I disagree with board number one or the majority. Just as I disagreed with, you know, the tax situation we had earlier. Well, I wasn't over there in the newspaper talking to everybody that I disagree totally. However, the majority of the board voted, and I worked collectively to make a difference. I mean, I look at it from that perspective. You know, I mean, if somebody's doing something wrong, that's a total different situation. But we're talking about when we vote on a particular policy or whatever we vote on, we're not doing anything wrong. So if you differ, you know, you did, and now you work collectively together now to make a difference. It's like if you disagree with closing or consolidating or closing a particular school, the board voted to do so. We're going to work now to make that particular school effective as a board member, working together. I think that's great harmony. As a board member, I think you should have that type of attitude. So if we're talking about that, absolutely yes. But if we're talking about board members doing something wrong, I think that's common sense that you would not go along with that. Am I making sense? I'm not.
No.
Madam Chair, and I agree, you're making sense, but I don't believe that what we were talking about from the outset. I think Mr. Whitley was saying something else. The state law is state law, and we don't need to re-enter that when we come to our meetings. So the law is the law. So he is saying there's no need to rewrite that into our policy.
Right.
And
ethics
so we
is
make
ethics.
we condensing the policy, but we having the same strength of the policy before by letting the state law stand as it is.
And I leaned over to whisper to Dr. Ingram because he and I have done quite a bit of work trying to prepare for a board workshop. And one of the main goals of the board workshop is to talk about communication protocols and talk about our vision as a board, how we communicate with each other, how we behave after a majority vote where someone has dissented, going to the newspaper and all kinds of things. So I think, like Mr. Whitley was saying, we might come back and create another policy possibly in the future, but we've actually got a whole board meeting planned around protocols, communication protocols, and our vision as a board to come together. So I feel like some of the things we're discussing now, we really will vet out the rest, what I think your concern is and your concern as well, to come up with protocols for how we want to operate as a board now and in the future.
And that's how I look at it, as a living document. It's not just we're doing this and then we're stopping. I think we're looking at all the policies and like the chair lady is saying, when we find additional things that we need to add,
well, I
then
wouldn't
we'll
say
bring it
anything
forth.
different than that. What I was saying is that it's common sense. If the majority of the board is doing something that is legally wrong, and you know it is, as a board member, you don't have to agree. I'm the point that I was making, but what I was saying, if we just voted on a particular policy or whatever and I differ, well, so I differ. So now I am going to work collectively with the board to make it work, is what I was saying. So maybe having a different point.
So the legal part of the ethics, I think, is stated in the first paragraph, saying that we have to, that we're responsible, that we need to follow state law. Those things are in the what we just passed.
Well, your powers are derived from the state law, but there are many policies I just took completely out because you got to follow state law. And when you ask me a question, Josh, am I allowed to do X? I'm not going to the board policy. I'm going to the state law, and I'm going to give you advice from the State Ethics Act. So number one, no, that language is removed. To come back to Mr. Wright's point, you're exactly right. We all should get along. Let's all go tell the world how great of a cohesive unit we are. But on some things, you're just going to disagree. I think if you passed a policy, even if you passed it, it would be on the face, and it exists today. It's on the face unconstitutional. So if a board member was called on a code of conduct, which has been attempted in the past, I've been involved with from the prior board on attempting to go after a board member for his First Amendment rights. If that board member filed a lawsuit challenging your policy that said everybody had to agree with it, guess what? You'd lose every day and twice on Sunday. If a board member disagrees with the 8 other members on attendance appeals, he has the right to go out there and tell his constituents why he wouldn't have granted the attendance appeals. Nothing in the Code of Ethics under the First Amendment would require him to support the other 8. I agree with you, Mr. Wright. We all need to be together, and we will be on most issues. But at the end of the day, First Amendment trumps any policy that you think is how the board should operate. So even if you pass that policy, as your lawyer, I'm telling you it is unconstitutional. You cannot tell anybody, any one person, what they have to do outside when they are exercising their First Amendment rights and representing their district. So that's my position on that. I agree with you. I just don't think it should be a policy. It should just be how y'all work together.
Well, and my intention for not deleting BH was not to trump law. It wasn't to tell people how to behave outside of a board meeting. And a lot of this is, what people would consider common sense. We're all representing the entire district. You're not supposed to use personal political gain. When we're voting here, we're not Democrat, Republican, whatever, when we're sitting in these seats. And I'm just saying, don't scrap the entire policy, BH. We can go back and tweak it to make sure that it is constitutional, make sure it is legal, but to not delete that whole policy, to go back and revise it. That was what my amendment was about.
All right, so we have an amendment to strike BH from the repeal list. The motion was made by Ms. Lee. It was a second by Mr. Barrow. If there is no other discussion, we'll call the question on the amendment. All in favor, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
1, 2. Opposed, nay?
Nay.
All right, so now that amendment fails, we're back to the original motion, which we are not going to repeat, with all the alphabet of B, BA, BAF, and et cetera. Don't do it. Motion by McQuillan, second by Spann. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All in favor, please respond by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. First reading passes. Excellent. I love a good debate. Thank you all so much. Thanks for all the work that was done before we even got here. We'll move on now to 6A, the superintendent's report. Dr. Ingram.
Do we have school efficiency consultants, Madam Chairwoman? And tonight we have Mr. Ricky Lopes and Mr. Hank Hurd and Dr. Tony Parker to give us a report on the work that they've done over the past several months.
Thank you. Madam Chair, board members, Dr. Ingram, thank you for having us back. My name is Ricky Lopes. I'm a partner with SEC, and a founding member of SEC, Hank Hurd, is back in the audience. Of course, we've been working with Dr. Parker, who all of you know. But first of all, I want to give kudos to the board for taking the positive and immediate action to determine what processes and procedures need to be looked at. The easy thing would have been to wait and let other things happen and then come in and make some changes. But you did take the positive action to have an outsider come in and look at some of the things that are going on here in Berkeley School District. And we thank you for that. We thank you for letting SEC be part of a potential solution to some of the issues that we found over our 4 to 5 months that we've been working with you. But once again, I just thought you needed to know that was a very positive action that y'all took to go ahead and look at some of these issues. You have a booklet that's got the report, the written booklet in front of you. And obviously, we're not going to read the whole thing for sake of time, but we are going to highlight some of the items on each of the pages. If we'll start off with, rather than going through the introduction of who SEC is and so forth, we'll start with page 3 on the executive summary. And you'll see that as part of the changes the board has approved since February, you've replaced your auditors, and the audit is going well now from what I was told today. The auditors have finished most of their work, but of course you don't have your final audit report yet. And one of the things that we found that is typical with school systems is, and for various reasons, is that the district is not utilizing the current technology to integrate finance and HR. In other words, there's some technology that's out there that could allow things to be done more efficiently, maybe quicker and more accurately, and due to some software limitations that you have with your current software, you're not able to implement some of those things. And so without going into a lot of detail, that is a major issue as far as your processes are concerned for Berkeley. If you go to page 4, let's look at some recommendations that we have. One of the things that we recommend for Berkeley is that you do what's called a comprehensive annual financial report that's prepared and submitted to 2 agencies for approval. One is ASBO International, that's the the Association of School Business Officials, and then GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association. They have a mechanism in place where you submit your financial reports to them, and it goes to reviewers, 3 to 5 reviewers, and they look at the report to determine if it meets their criteria for approval. And what that does is it lends some credibility to your financial reports. And so the first year that you do that is the toughest because you're starting from scratch to meet all the requirements. But after that, it's just the idea of pretty much changing the numbers and updating it for whatever procedures may have changed from one year to the next. But that is something that carries some weight as far as financial statements are concerned. So in the future, we would recommend that you consider submitting your financial statements to both of those organizations. One thing that's different in South Carolina from what we're used to seeing, not all of your funds are subject to board approval. And it can be done, but it's not required. And here in Berkeley, all of your funds were not being approved by the board. We would recommend in the future that the complete budget be approved by the board. For one thing, it gives you some information that tells you how the money's being spent, not just on particular funds, but for the whole district. And so, and also, you could require amendments to those budgets. We noticed that there were, if I remember correctly, there were no amendments or maybe one amendment to your original budget. But by having all the funds in front of you and approving them, then the board has some input as to what's being spent as a school system. Another thing that we think needs to happen here is that the staff members need training on reconciling vendor payments. So we're going to go over some detail in just a second on a specific reconciliation that needs to be done. But vendor payments are pretty easy to reconcile. You have so much coming out of an employee's check, you accumulate that amount and you remit it to the vendor. As we've talked about in our previous meeting, and we're going to talk about in just a second, the health insurance bill has not been reconciled, and as a result, it's costing the school district money. And so getting to that point, the health insurance reconciliation should be done on a monthly basis and on a timely basis. For example, I was used to a situation where it was reconciled within the first 10 days of the following month. Okay, and so that way, if there are any discrepancies in the report, you can go ahead and communicate those to the vendor and either correct it with that particular bill or correct it in a future bill, but you know what your problems are. The longer you wait to reconcile, the harder it is to go back and correct the problem. And so from what we can tell, it goes back several months, several years. In some cases, it was all the way up to $80,000 a month discrepancy in the bill and what was being remitted. Some processes have already been recommended and some changes have been made. It's still not to where you need to be, but it is getting better. And so hopefully in the next few months, that that process or that reconciliation will get to the point where you have minimal, if no, no differences in your health insurance reconciliation. One of the issues that you have with that is that your software vendor doesn't really have a report in place that's easy to use for reconciliation. And that gets back to technology. You are putting new software in, or the recommendation is to put in new software in October of 2018 that will integrate your HR and your finance software, but also it should provide some reports that will make it easier to reconcile the health insurance. One of the things that also we recommend is that you contact PIBA to see if there's a chance to get some refunds back for some of these overpayments. Supposedly they'll go back 13 months, but documentation has to be provided, and I don't know what their policy is on reimbursing. They may say, no, it's too late, we're not going to give you any money back, but it wouldn't hurt to at least try to get some of that money back for the overpayments for the past 13 months. One of the things that we did work on is a written documentation between the HR and the finance departments to make sure that everybody understands their role in doing the reconciliation. Obviously, it's coordination between the two departments, and if everybody's doing their part, then it works out smoothly. But all it takes is one not to do their responsibility, and the process falls apart. And so I think we came to a consensus as to what needs to be done, and now it's an idea of pulling all those pieces together. For example, the software vendor that I mentioned came up with what they think is a solution this week. Well, they haven't had a chance to see if that solution works yet or not, but hopefully so. It'll make things a little bit easier. But the different folks that are responsible for this reconciliation need to do their part so that it can be pulled off. You use a lot of P cards, have a lot of P card transactions here, but we were comfortable with the procedures and policies that are in place to have controls over those P cards. As a result of that, you're able to generate about $600,000 in rebates. But at first, when we saw the magnitude of the transactions, we were a little bit concerned because anytime you use any kind of a card, you lose some control. But they still keep the purchasing procedures in place, and somebody's monitoring those purchase card transactions on a daily and or monthly basis. So that in and of itself was not an issue, even though initially it did seem to be a large amount. If we go to page 5, and anytime you have questions, just interrupt me. I know I talk fast, so if I need to slow down, tell me.
I have a question.
Yes,
about,
sir.
Since you're going to page 5, I have a question on page 4.
Sure.
Allocation formulas are not consistent throughout the district. Needs to develop allotment formulas. Where are they inconsistent? Because I thought it was based on a per pupil basis in terms of allocation.
The formulas themselves are consistent. What's not consistent is the budget matching up to the allotment formulas. For example, there's nowhere, if you look at the budget document, there's nowhere that says there's I'm just making up a number, 2,612 teachers in Berkeley. Here's where the teachers are. There's this many guidance counselors. Here's where they're being allotted. What you have is a number in HR, and you have a dollar amount in the budget, but there should be a budget document that ties in those allotments to the budget. And so there's no way of reconciling the number of positions to the budget because you're looking at dollars on one end and positions on the other. What we're used to seeing is a budget document with more narrative, more detail in it that gives you the number of positions. It tells you we're going to buy, computers, we're going to buy textbooks, whatever the case may be. And what you have in your budget document is cumulative or summary line items, but it doesn't give you the detail that tells you the positions that you're approving in that particular budget document. So it's not so much that there's not allotment formulas, it's just that they're not used in the way that we're used to seeing that carries it all the way through the budget process.
But it's my understanding the new software will reconcile these problems?
It should, but it's still going to take more. The budget process is going to need to change to where that information is provided on the front end to the board. I can't remember what your budget process is, if it's like April, May, whatever. Whenever you approve a budget, the budget document you approve would be different than what you're used to seeing right now if you carry through with that recommendation. But it would give the board more information as to what's in the budget and how the money's being spent. So yes, sir, you would see a change. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Speaking of HR, when we go to page 5, a lot of what you see on page 5, those recommendations deal with technology again. And so hopefully the new software will take care of some of these issues. The very first recommendation is the automation is essential to streamline the operations. There could be some duplication of effort once a piece of information is entered, that's the last time that should have to be entered by anybody in the district. If you put in Ricky Lope's address for this particular function, it shouldn't have to be entered again. I'm not saying that it is, but it shouldn't have to be entered again anywhere else in the HR payroll transaction. And so hopefully with the new technology, it'll prevent what could be duplicative steps that are in the process. Now there's paperwork going back and forth, and hopefully with the new software you'll have less paperwork, but the information will be there readily available for both departments. And the very last bullet there is one we just talked about. That's the one I wanted to highlight. The very last bullet on page 5. All positions should be identified in the budget with the number of positions by funding source, not just the amount, to facilitate the position control process. What that means is there should be a numerical system in place. If I've got, using my example, 2,612 teachers, there would be a numerical position number for each of those 2,612 positions. If I leave in October, the person that takes my place would still have my position number. And that way you're reconciling the dollars and the positions in the budget to the allotment formulas. And so it's all part of that reconciliation process internally to be able to keep up with positions. If we'll skip page 6 and go to page 7, we're going to talk a little bit about risk management. One of the glaring things that we noticed right away is that we couldn't find no evidence of where insurance policies were put out for bid or marketed. And so as a result, you have no way of knowing if you're paying a competitive price for your policies. And so when we get to recommendations in a second, we'll talk about that some more, but it appeared it had been quite a while since the insurance policies had been put out for bid. Another thing that for a system this size, we usually see some self-insurance for insurance, whether it be workers' comp or some quasi-liability policy. With 5,000 plus students here, you're large enough to be able to self-insure, and what you'll see is a drop-off in premiums and some control over your premiums, because you'll do other things that we'll mention in just a second that will help you reduce your incidence for workers' comp and so forth. So there are some alternative things to look at. That's obviously we haven't done yet, but something that can be done in the future to see if some of these things can be self-insured. And speaking of workers' comp, in workers' comp, they have what they call a mod rate. That's your experience factor, and 1 is your average. 1 is what you shoot for. Here it's 1.17. which means you're above average. So you have a higher level of workers' comp claims than what you would normally see. What we don't know is the reason. We didn't go that far yet, but what is the reason for that? And so once again, if you have some internal things in place that can minimize the claims, then that'll bring your premiums down. Or if you're self-insured, or reduce the amount that you're having to pay to a third-party administrator. One of the things that we did notice that came out from the most recent actuarial study for your district is that you could see a huge increase in your liability in your property insurance beginning in July of 2018. And so obviously we're not privy to all that information, but there was some documentation that showed you could have up to a 30% increase in your premiums beginning July 1 of 18. If you'll turn the page and go to page 8, what are our recommendations? On page 8, you'll see that we recommend that you have a competitive bid process for all of your insurance products, all of your property and liability insurance products. And so we actually have a recommendation on how to go about doing that, but we're of the opinion that by doing that and also taking into consideration possible self-insurance opportunities, that you should be able to save significant dollars in your budget by putting those out for bid. And the second bullet talks about workers' comp in more detail. We won't read all those sentences, but basically looking at self-insurance as an option. If that's not a good option, then of course you can still go with a third-party administrator, second party that can handle the insurance for you. But with the self-insurance, you hire a third party to pay the claims, but you cut out that markup between the claim itself and the insurance company. It's just you paying the claim to somebody to write the checks and so forth for you. Now, as part of that recommendation, with risk management, that means that you would also need somebody that is, in fact, a risk manager. Right now, you have a risk management person and you have a risk management department, but not either that person needs to be trained or you need another person that really understands the risk management program. The terminology, they have the education background, they've got the licenses, they've got the classes, that understands the complete package. And so once you have that person in place, it could be the current person or it could be however you just decided to do that, but once that person is in place, then you can implement some of these things that we've talked about. Another recommendation, another observation is that you don't have an occupational safety coordinator. Usually in a district this size, you see somebody whose sole function is working and making sure that the employees are following safety procedures, that the playgrounds are safe and so forth. That's a 8-hour-a-day, full-year job. And we didn't see where that particular, there are some people who have safety in their job titles, but their functions didn't necessarily tie in what we're used to seeing in some of the other school systems. We did put a sample description of a risk management job description in the back of the report of an example of what one's qualifications and experience would be if, in fact, you did have a full-time risk manager. If you go to page 11, that's where we mentioned that either the current risk manager needs to be trained or you would have another person who is a risk manager that would meet some of those qualifications that we've already talked about. You do need an occupational health and safety coordinator. And part of that job would be communicating what those practices and policies are to the employees. A lot of times what we find is that, especially with worker comp claims, people are, for example, standing on desks or chairs to change a light bulb in their classroom. Well, that's not the job of the teacher or the TA to do that. You say, well, that's pretty simple, but you need something in writing. You need training classes for employees as the do's and don'ts of things that should or should not be done to help reduce workers' comp claims. If we go to page 12, this is just kind of a hybrid of other items that we have found along the way that need to be considered. The first one is a biggie. We observed that a lot of your contracted services were approved and paid with little documentation, and a lot of times they were sole sourced. There was no competition for those particular contracts. And also, it didn't appear that the terms were reviewed by an attorney. And you say, well, why would they need to be reviewed by an attorney? The question came up earlier is, what's the board liable for? Well, somebody's signing a contract on behalf of the school district, and when you deal with these other companies, they've got legal documents that could be fairly thick. Without having an attorney review those documents, you could be opening the board up to some liability that you're not even aware of because it hasn't gone through an approval process. For example, the district I'm in, the attorney reviews all of our contracts over a certain dollar amount. In our recommendation for you, we're recommending a small dollar amount just based on things that have happened in the recent past here, but anything over $25,000 be reviewed by an attorney. And one quick example, a lot of times a vendor will put their state of the home office as the place where any legal action has to take place. Okay, well, on all of our contracts, before the attorney will approve it, he scratches that out and puts North Carolina. Okay, if there's going to be any legal action, it's going to be in North Carolina. We're not going to California, New York, or whatever, because that's where their home office is. Well, if nobody's looking at that, and that's the boilerplate contract, and it's being signed, then if you take action against them, you're going to be going to those other states because that's what the contract says. So that's a small example, but you need somebody to look at the contractual terms of all your contracts. In South Carolina, you do have purchasing laws, purchasing guidelines, and there are some exceptions to those guidelines. The purchasing agent, purchasing manager is familiar with those guidelines. There appear to be some cases where she was overridden and things that should have been put out for bid were not, and that's where the sole source came into play. And so you have to make sure that that there's a procedure in place to where if there's a disagreement as to whether something needs to go out for bid or not, that information go to the board attorney to make a determination as to whether it fits that exception list that's described in the state statutes for South Carolina. I did meet with the EC director on one of my visits, and there was some concern about Medicaid reimbursement in South Carolina, and she had mentioned that she is, excuse me, was trying to get that information communicated, because obviously if her Medicaid revenue goes down, that either one of two things is going to happen. You're going to have to cut services, or you're going to have to get the revenue from somewhere else to replace that difference. So our recommendation there is that there be communication, at least on a quarterly basis, between the EC director and the finance director, to make sure that the Medicaid revenue is at least the same as it has been, or if it's going to go down, action can be taken when the budget's prepared. Excuse me. Another biggie that we found here with a district your size is you don't have a true internal auditor. There's somebody that has some of that function in her title, but she's really not an internal auditor. What you need is a position that does not report to finance, that would probably report directly to the superintendent, that does internal audits for schools and departments. The reason why we say they should not report to finance, they need to not have that, excuse me, they need to be unbiased, and so they can report directly to the superintendent and not feel like they have to give the answer that the finance department wants. Okay, by reporting directly to the superintendent, that gets rid of that concern. And so, for a district your size, you need at least one, and depending on how that goes, you may actually need two: one to work with the schools and one to work with your operations side. But you need at least one internal auditor here in Berkeley. Another bullet that we had here for capital expenditures is, of course, you already know, exceeded what was appropriated by about $7 million. In and of itself, that may not be unusual. What is unusual is that you didn't know about it, or were not notified of it until after the fact. What should happen, getting back to our initial point about all funds should be budgeted, no money should be spent in excess of what's been budgeted without board approval. So let's say that I know I'm going to overspend my school budget, my school construction budget by $7 million. I would have to come to the board for a budget amendment to say I need $7 million that I'm going to transfer or move from this other source to cover that deficit subject to your approval. And then the board would say, well, no, we're not going to spend $7 million more, go back and cut the expenses, or yes, we're okay with transferring the money. But there needs to be a mechanism in place where you're not finding out after the fact. You're involved in that decision ahead of time to see where that additional $7 million is going to come from. You had no options at the end because it had already been spent. Okay, so you had to come up with the money by transferring it from another source. So anyway, that was one that we think you need to look at also. And that's the quick down and dirty. Like I said, I talked fast. I know it was. Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate it. But are there any questions on the report itself?
You may not know this, but going back to the insurance programs, do you know who was you saying here that there was an assigned agent or broker specialist? Do you know who that was that generally assigned that in the past?
There were several. You have some of your insurance with the state of South Carolina, and then you had some through a broker, multiple coverages. And it's changed names over the years, so I don't know if I can remember the name for who it was currently, but you had another broker that you had a lot of your policies with.
No, I just mean within the district. Who historically?
Oh, I'm sorry. The finance officer was responsible. Okay. I'm sorry. I thought you meant the outside.
Not the outside. Okay, so the CFO assigned it, and your concern was that wasn't competitively marketed, and that there were a bunch of brokerage fees and consulting fees that caused some concern.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Sorry.
I noticed on that last page you put a bullet item about trash compactors being sole sourced.
Yeah, that item's actually already being worked on. There was a sole source for some trash compactors that the system has been buying over a period of time, and it had a 5-year, it's a 5 or 10 year contract with it, and it expires in November next month. And so we found out today the district is already in process of notifying that vendor that the contract is up. They can still bid on it, but it's going to go out it's not going to be sole source this time. It's going out for bid.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of how trash container, how you have a sole source on trash containers. I mean, you know, some things make sense sole source, but that one really kind of sticks out of how you have a sole source on garbage when we have our very own landfill here in Berkeley County. That seems a little odd.
I have a couple of questions. The broker specialist, I assume from what I'm reading here, we still employ a broker specialist for insurance purposes that negotiate for insurance companies, and you're requesting, or your recommendation is for us to outsource this or to get bids on them beginning next year?
Right now, if I'm not misunderstanding, you use an outside broker who gets your insurance policies for you.
And we pay this
yes,
company.
And you pay that person. And so even brokerage services can be bid out, as well as the individual insurance policies. And so what had happened over a period of time, neither one of those had been bid out, and so there's no comparison to see whether those brokerage fees were excessive, whether the insurance premiums were excessive.
It seems that the bang for the buck is minimal, and we're overpaying this person or this company.
That's what it appeared to be based on our analysis, but until we put it out for bid, we won't have a way to compare whether that was the case or not.
One other question. How many people are you requesting or are you suggesting that we employ?
I may leave some out. For the risk management, right now you have one person. What we could envision is an actual risk manager and a person, so you'd have two in that capacity, then an occupational safety coordinator. So that would be 3 people, but you already have one in place. So that would be 2 additional, and then also an internal auditor would be an additional position. I think it's maybe hard to visualize now, but with these risk management positions in place, by putting the safety procedures and safety inspections in place, your insurance premiums come down. Insurance companies they have their own little checklist. Are you doing X, Y, and Z? If so, they reduce their premium. And so you may not see it the first year because you'll be in the process of getting new policies, but you should see in the long run that those positions will more than pay for themselves and reduce insurance premiums in the future.
We have 2 safety officers, I think, on is that correct, Mr. Jackson?
Security.
So this is another...
Not occupational health and safety. So it's
OSHA. Okay.
more with folks breaking the law and handling SROs, and this is more...
Apples and oranges. Okay. Thank you.
And of course, we're available if you have any questions, but thank you for giving us the opportunity to work with you. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for having us.
Thank you for digging in and giving. I know we've continued to push through this. There's lots of information still to process, but you guys have been a tremendous help through this process. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Madam Chairwoman, if I could go ahead to Section B in our agenda, my report. First of all, I do want to thank the SEC for their candor. I've personally known of Ricky's work for many years, and I've known Hank personally for many years. They're impeccable professionals, and I think the candor is absolutely necessary in going forward and making things a lot better. I also want to commend the board for the lively debate, and also to commend the members of the audience and the speakers, because I'm a firm believer, I can't say it, Attorney Whitley as well as Oliver Wendell Holmes, but I tend to think that some of us are smarter than one of us, and you put enough people in a room, you come out with a better decision at the end of the day. So that was good. I had no problems with that at all. In fact, I was very encouraged to hear that. Thanks to the staff for excellent reports from academic services. That was really, really good. And also the update on the construction. Thank you for the thorough updates there. We got a lot of talent in this district, and I want everybody to know that. And I think I'm qualified to say that, having been several places in my career. So I want to thank you for that. Also, the art show earlier this evening, that was a big hit, a big success. Thank you for coming to that, those of you that were able to. That was really exciting. I love to see the artwork. I don't know where my talent went with that, but it's not in that area. But I'm amazed. And it's such an integral part of a holistic education. So I hope as we move forward, we will incorporate the arts in even a more meaningful way in our report card, that we because I think we can come up with a report card that exceeds what the state expects. The state's kind of a minimal expectation, and I think that Berkeley County is poised to set even a greater standard. I know that Dr. O'Gorman and I get excited about that. We get kind of giddy over it, actually. I want to congratulate Dr. Kelly Wolf. She got an award, the Richard M. Cuffle Memorial Outstanding Contributor Award. Thank you, Kelly. That was a pretty well kept secret, wasn't it? You didn't know you were getting it. We knew you were getting it, but you didn't know you were getting it. So we also received 6 ABC grant awards from the South Carolina Arts Commission. The schools that received them, if I can read this quickly, Hall Arts Magnet, Philip Simmons Elementary, Philip Simmons Middle, Whitesville Elementary School. I think 1, 2, 3. Did I leave one out? Whoops. It's not highlighted. I'll have to correct that. Cane Bay Elementary. I didn't total it up, but significant dollars. Thank you for the arts and education grants and the people responsible. Yesterday, I attended a Bright Ideas grant. It was somewhat of a chore to get there, but I had to get lost at least once. Isn't that right, Susan? But I made it. And we had grant winners, Leslie Haywood, Dylan Hudson, Lisa Johnson, Amanda Miller, Lisa Mugeo, my apologies if I slaughtered the name, Carolyn Mullinax, Michelle Norwood, Teresa Summers, and Linda Swanson. I'm always impressed and heartened, and thanks to the Berkeley Electric Corporation for the sponsorship of those grants. You know, these are things that teachers don't have to do, but they do to make their classrooms better, and I really certainly appreciate that. And Sharon and Nick, thank you for coming to support us and our work. The Teacher Forum, such a good venue, and I can't wait to get to one of your meetings. And you know me, I'll probably carry the conversation, but you guys really do great work with the teachers, and it's important that you keep our voice and keep us honest and keep us grounded, and that's really important, and I try to reflect on that. So I'm looking forward to perhaps coming in and testing out my teaching skills, and hopefully pretty soon. Also like to report that the clear bag, no bag rule at Goose Creek High School went very well Friday night, and most people were very positive about it. Tim, thanks for that, and Dion, or Mr. Jackson, thank you for that. I was there through the end of the first quarter, most of the second quarter, and everybody was orderly and respected the process. And I think we're grateful for the fact that the board took, that we were able to implement some things really kind of on the fly, and we'll continue to look for things that will increase and improve our safety procedures, because nothing ever really matters if people aren't safe. So we'll continue to do that. And the governor has proclaimed that a metric week in South Carolina, October 8th through 14th. So get your meter sticks out. It's metric week. And being an English major, that's all I'll say about that. But thank you, Madam Chairwoman, for the floor. And that concludes my report for the evening.
Thank you, Dr. Ingram. Next, on to the board chair report, upcoming dates and events. I have not heard from anybody who plans to attend the South Carolina School Board Association meeting in December. Is anyone planning to go to that meeting? We actually need a delegate and an alternate.
I'll go.
What's the date again?
Mr. Barrow, it may be when you're out of town.
I really don't.
It's December. I'm going to make up a day. 2nd, 3rd, 1st, whatever it's the first weekend in December.
I'm willing to go if you.
Are you out of town? I thought you emailed your out of town.
That's the first. I'll be.
Do the first. Excellent.
Do the first.
So Mr. Barrow can attend. Okay, so Mr. Barrow will be our delegate. And Ms. Lee will be our alternate. Excellent.
As long as it's not the first, because I'll be out of town on the first.
I think it's Saturday, Sunday. Is that I'm like begging for somebody to tell me the right answer. My day ran right into the art show and straight here, and I never got home with my notes or my pad, which I should have just left in my car. So it is the first weekend in December. It does start on Saturday. It should be all day on Saturday and part of the day on Sunday. And we should actually, I think, vote on Sunday morning, and we do have some number of votes that will be voting for South Carolina School Board Association. Excellent. We'll now entertain a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion by Mr. McQuillan, a second by Mr. Barrow to enter into executive session for the stated reasons, discussion of a pending employment matter, and to hear 4 expulsion appeals. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All in favor, please respond by saying aye. 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 Opposed, nay. We are in executive session. Is there a motion to enter into regular session?
So moved.
Second. There's a motion by Mr. McQuillan, a second by Wofford, to enter into regular session. I have no. I'd like to state that there was no action taken in executive session. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All in favor of returning to regular session, please respond by saying aye. 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 Opposed, nay. We are in regular session.
Madam Chairwoman, I would like to recommend to the board Dr. Monica Dixon Houston to be named as the new adult education coordinator with a contract to take effect October 11, 2017.
Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I move that we name Dr. Monica Dixon Houston as the new adult education coordinator with a contract to take effect October 11th, 2017.
Second.
There's a motion by Ms. Lee, a second by Reverend Spann, to name Dr. Monica. I have no.
Houston.
Dixon Houston. I just wanted to say Houston. I apologize. Dr. Monica Dixon Houston to be named as the new adult education coordinator with a contract to take effect on October 11th, 2017. All in favor, please respond by saying aye. 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 Opposed, nay. Welcome, Dr. Houston.
Yes, Madam Chairwoman, I would also like to recommend to the board Natasha Wright to be named as the new certified employment coordinator with a contract to take effect October 11, 2017.
I move that the board, Madam Chairman, accept the recommendation that Natasha Wright be named the new certified employment coordinator with a contract to take effect October the 11th, 2017.
Second.
There's a motion by Ms. Conder, a second by Mr. Wright, that Natasha Wright be named the certified employment coordinator with a contract to take effect on October 11th, 2017. All in favor, please respond by saying aye. 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 Opposed, nay.
Frank, I have to say something. She's a lot prettier.
No
a
relation.
Lot prettier, right? I'm sorry.
Oh my
but that's
goodness.
just the truth.
Welcome, both Dr. Dixon Houston and Ms. Wright, to the family and to the district office at Berkeley County School District. The board is not always so kooky and have radical candor, but truthfully we are, and we are so happy to have excellent professionals joining our team, and so we thank you for making the step into these positions, and we welcome you to Berkeley County. I think you were here already, but thank you very much for being into your new positions. We have one additional item from executive session.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Based on the recommendations of SEC and also analysis and discussion with Harding, Parker, and Young Associates, I would like to recommend to the board that we add the following 4 positions to be posted: a risk assessment manager, an internal auditor, an OSHA safety officer, and to create an office of a chief diversity officer for a district our size. So those are the recommendations I have before the board.
Madam Chairwoman, I make a motion to approve the posting of a risk assessment manager position, an internal auditor position, an OSHA safety officer position, and a position for chief diversity officer.
Second.
There's a motion by Mr. McQuillan, a second by Mr. Ramsey, to approve the recommendation of Dr. Ingram to post jobs for a risk assessment manager, an internal auditor, an OSHA safety officer, and a chief diversity officer. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All in favor, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Thank you, Dr. Ingram. We'll now move on to expulsion appeals. We'll entertain a motion for student number 1.
Madam Chairwoman, in the matter of student number 1, I move that we grant the expulsion appeal and allow the student to attend the alternative school.
Second.
There's a motion by Mr. McQuillan, a second by Mr. Wright, to grant the expulsion appeal and assign the student to the Berkeley Alternative School. All in favor, please respond by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay.
Nay.
8-1. Motion passes. Student number 2. Is there a motion for student number 2?
Madam Chair, in the matter of student number 2, I move that we grant the expulsion appeal and allow the student to return to their home school under strict probation.
Second.
There's a motion by Mr. McQuillan, a second by Mr. Wright, to grant the expulsion appeal and return the student to his home school on strict probation. All in favor, please respond by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay.
Nay.
The motion passes. We'll now move on to student number 3. Is there a motion for student number 3? I move that we grant the expulsion appeal for student number 3 and assign the student to the Berkeley Alternative School.
Second.
There's a motion by Wofford, a second by Mr. McQuillan, to grant the expulsion appeal and assign the student to the Berkeley Alternative School. All in favor, please respond by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay.
Nay.
The motion passes. Student number 4.
Madam Chairwoman, in the matter of student number 4, I move that we grant the expulsion appeal and allow the student to attend the alternative school.
Second.
There's a motion by Mr. McQuillan, a second by Ms. Conder, to grant the expulsion appeal of student number 4 and assign student number 4 to the Berkeley Alternative School. All in favor, please respond by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay.
Nay.
Motion passes. We'll now entertain any other action as needed from executive session. Hearing none, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make the motion.
Second.
There's a motion by Mr. Ramsey, a second by Mr. McQuillan to adjourn. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All in favor, please respond by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. We are adjourned.